So welcome to MAiDHouse's fall virtual event, Estate Planning with Libby Wildman. My name is Tekla, and I'm the Executive Director of MAiDHouse. Thank you for joining us to learn more about the benefits of philanthropy, particularly for important charitable organizations like ourselves, MAiDHouse, while at the same time maximizing the tax benefits. For example, these free virtual events would not be possible without our wonderful individual donor support. Before we get started, please note the diversity statement in the chat. We are approaching September 30th, the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, an opportunity to reflect and take action following the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's calls to action. As a virtual event, we acknowledge we span many traditional territories. For us as the host of this meeting, we are on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat people. And then we are now home to many diverse First Nations and Métis people. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississauga of the Credits. Sorry, I have something in my throat. I'm now pleased to introduce Libby Wildman, who's going to come on camera with me. Hi, Libby.
Hi.
Libby has generously donated her time to explore estate planning, and she has over 35 years of experience in the financial services. Libby Wildman is a partner and leader in holistic wealth and planning at Davis Ray Investment Council, alongside her husband, John O'Connell. She also created The Perspective of Money, a course and keynote that challenges the notion that economic wealth is the sole measure of success. Libby also founded Liminal Escapes, a retreat designed to help individuals reshape their relationship with money, and The Collective, a community for female entrepreneurs. Known for her deep expertise in emotional intelligence, Libby simplifies complex financial matters, helping clients achieve balance and fulfillment in all areas of life. She co-creates personalized strategies with her clients, leveraging insurance products and John's top-tier investment returns to grow and protect their wealth while crafting the life they aspire to live. So Libby, we're so very happy for you to come and join us on this discussion. As you know, MAiDHouse works in the field of end of life. And one of the things we like to encourage is discussions about what do you want? What does that look for you? And one of those is around legacy and estate planning and giving. So we are excited to join you. And I am also excited that maybe you're going to simplify these complex financial matters. So we will see if we succeed, if I understand all that was said by the end. So I'm going to hand over the group to you now.
Great. Thank you. Well, we're going to try and abide by the military formula of KISS, keep it simple, stupid, because everybody's situation is unique. And as I have studied incredibly obsessively, money is something that each one of us feels differently about. And for some of us, it defines us. For some of us, it's freedom, for some of it's security. And this is why I started my retreats and my talk on the 7 perspectives of money, because society has us believe that economic wealth is the only wealth that matters. And yet community matters, our health matters, access to appropriate health care, family matters, our value systems matter. And having Tekla 2 mother-in-laws who have used MAiD in the past due to Lou Gehrig's disease, I am immensely grateful that this is coming to the forefront and is going to be easier for Canadians who so want to have the choice, and also to have it in a comforting place, because my mother-in-law, I believe it was 10 years ago, was in a hospital room, and it was quite jarring. So I thank you all and your team for existing. Hopefully this can be a little bit interactive, because this is for you. My hope is that I spark some interest and explain enough things about how this can be reciprocally good, both for the charity and also for the donor to not only feel good, but perhaps save some money in taxes. Charitable planning can be complicated, but it doesn't have to be. It's really driven by you having a feeling in your heart that you would like to do something that's outside of yourself. And one of my largest beliefs, and when I started giving money away to charities at a very young age, relative to what I was making, I found that I was just modeling this for my kids and I didn't even know I was. And so, one of my favorite things that I like talking about with families or groups is also how do we teach the next generation how to give money? Because you don't have to be mortgage free or have millions in the bank before you can give. And I'm going to screen share now. But in fact, there's some really interesting statistics about giving in Canada because we're actually a pretty philanthropic country. And there's a lot of money that is given. Somewhere around 75 to 80% of us give, which is terrific. The average amount, depending on the age, is $900 to $2,600 a year. And if you multiply that by thousands of people, that can be a significant amount for many charities that need this money. And we recognize that MAiDHouse is a sensitive topic. And so, in fact, it may be a little bit more difficult for MAiDHouse to find people to donate money unless they've had some personal experience with it. And that's one of the reasons we find that people do give money to charities. They usually have had a personal experience that makes them want to do that. Um, so, it can be a powerful motivator to give money to a particular cause or organization or movement. And we also find those that give a large amount of money are generally interested in actually helping to bring awareness around the cause that they are supporting, or potentially change the way it's being viewed or rolled out in society. So impact is really important. One of the interesting things in Canada, because we are very different than the US, we have quite generous tax incentives. So you can donate up to 75% of your net income, or for tax planning purposes in the year that you pass on, 100% of your income can be used for the charitable tax credit. So you may say, oh, wow, like how would I ever afford to give 75% of my net income in any one given year? And that's what we're going to explore, not just giving cash, but what are some other ways that we can actually magnify what we're giving and be able to get some tax relief on that. So I'm hoping that, oh, there we go. So we talked a little bit about that, about why people give. A very large percentage of charitable dollars in Canada go to faith, religions, churches, that kind of thing. So who knows in the future, Tekla, whether more causes will be getting the money because, we do see a lot of churches being turned into daycares and condos and things like that. Nonetheless, it is a fight to get the dollars from donors to go to things other than things like specific hospitals, specific schools, and specific churches. So we hope to be able to spark a connection for those of you who are listening to this with MAiDHouse in particular, or to reach out to the charities that you are already interested in helping out. So as I said, approximately 23 million Canadians give money, which is really quite astounding. Older Canadians, pretty obvious, age 55 and above are the largest donors. Generally speaking, if you're going to have a mortgage paid off and money in the bank, it's going to be when you're older. But we do also find that younger Canadians are giving money on a smaller basis. I also like to encourage people, if you don't have the money, to donate your time or get involved with volunteering at an event or helping to raise awareness. So it is not just money that the charities need. However, tonight, that's what we're going to be looking at. Um, Most of you probably, and please raise your hand if you have specific questions, because Tekla and Blair will be looking at that. Most of you are probably familiar with just donating cash in your will. There's a number of issues that can go along with this. One of them is that the charity rarely knows that anybody is leaving money in their will to a particular charity, which makes it difficult for them to plan, to know what might be coming down the road. So, if in fact you have named in your will a particular charity and you feel comfortable doing so, we encourage you to share that with whatever that charity is. So, the risks with naming a charity in your will are that obviously you can change your mind. You can fall in love with a new charity, and all of a sudden, your original bequest is done. The other thing is that there's a very large potential for family disputes. When we do will planning with people and they do want to leave money to a charity, we generally ask them to leave a percentage of their assets because your estate may be a certain size today. And if you're leaving a very specific number to the charity, by the time you pass, who knows, with end of life costs, long-term care homes, children needing money, whether that original bequest is now going to be a much larger percentage of your estate. The issue with that is, and we are seeing a massive increase in will litigation, is family members uh, litigating the will and saying that they don't believe this was your intent. Whether or not they win the litigation, it ties up your will and your estate for many years and creates huge legal bills and often really bad family feelings. So we do suggest if you're going to leave money in a will that you leave a percentage. We also suggest that you share it with your family so they know it's a really wonderful opportunity to share your values and your philosophies about life and why you chose this particular charity and why you would like this particular amount to go to them. It's a really great time to be able to pass on some of your life's philosophies and beliefs. The other issue that I'm very careful about as an advisor with people is to make sure that the people who are being left behind are adequately being looked after so that the amount of money you may be leaving to a charity is not potentially leaving a spouse or children who need your help in some kind of financial danger because too much money is going away to a charity. So it's really important to work with an advisor who is going to look at the whole of your situation to say, this is wonderful. You want to give back and have impact, but let's make sure that it actually is in alignment with all of your values and in alignment with your particular financial situation. So as we talked about, the uncertainty for a charity when you leave money in a will is that you can change your will at any time. Um, Also, it could take on average 12 to 18 months for your will to hit probate. And that is when a lot of people don't understand when you first pass away, all of your assets actually are passed on to your executor. And it is your executor's job then to pay off all debts and pay all taxes. And if there is not enough liquidity in an estate to pay taxes, then your executor has to start selling assets. This can mean that by the time CRA gets its piece and your debts have been paid and the taxes have been paid, and therefore your will is stamped probate, as they say, and probate is estate and administration tax. And let's just say on average, it's 1.5% of whatever you're worth. Um, it could be a long time until the charity actually gets the money that you have promised them. So it's not a bad idea. It just has pros and cons, like everything we're going to talk about today. And it really requires a fulsome conversation. I also would highly, highly recommend that you don't use an online will for this kind of planning, that you do seek out a will and estate lawyer. Don't use the person you bought your house from. Oh, they're great. I like them. They can do my wills. That's just a software. No, use an estate and tax planning lawyer and potentially, your own financial advisors. One of the, I would say, most popular now way of giving to a charity, and a wonderful thing to look at, is using life insurance. The charities really like it because if they can have, let's call it a bank of insurance policies over a period of time, there's going to be a pretty significant and consistent revenue that will be coming in annually for these charities. So there's two different ways to go about this. The interesting thing is, let's say you like to give $5,000 to your favorite charity, and therefore you get a $5,000 tax receipt. That $5,000, let's say you're going to do it for 10 years, you've donated $50,000 to the charity, and I'm sure they're very happy about that. But that same $5,000, if purchasing a life insurance policy, could magnify hugely the amount of money that the charity is going to get. So let's walk through this a little bit. So maximizing the impact of charitable donations through life insurance and aligning philanthropy with personal financial goals and Canadian tax benefits. Again, we're very different than the US. So why would we use insurance? Because you can give as little as $50 or $100 a month, and depending on your age, that could be $50 or $100,000 of a life insurance policy that your favorite charity is getting. Now, the tax benefits you get from using life insurance can be had one of two ways. You can either tax deduct the premiums during your lifetime, and we'll talk about how you do that, or you can, when you pass, take the tax credit for the amount of life insurance when you die. And depending upon your situation and what you need, there's some really terrific reasons as to why you might do it one way or the other. So here are the methods. You can name a charity as a beneficiary on a life insurance policy. So let's say we have $5,000 a year that we're donating, and it buys a $200,000 policy. When you name the charity as a beneficiary and the owner, then, when you name the charity as a beneficiary, then when you die, the charity gets the tax. And that $200,000 life insurance policy will now be a tax credit against your estate. I'm going to go over an example of how this might offset taxes on assets like a cottage or a chalet or a condo in Florida. But for the moment, just understand that it's not the $5,000 you're writing off when you make the charity the beneficiary. It's the actual amount of life insurance. And if you start a life insurance policy today at $200,000, it could in fact be $500,000 by the time you die, and your estate will get the tax credit for the $500,000, which is a significant amount of money. Now, if you're young, you may be saying, well, the charity might not get this money for 40 or 50 years. There are life insurance policies called whole life or universal life where there are cash values involved. And that is where the premiums are taken by the insurance company and invested. And that cash value inside the policy can be accessed or accessible by the charity during your lifetime. So if the right kind of policy is chosen to be given to the charity, then they can actually use the values during your lifetime, and then there's still a significant benefit at your death. So the very simple one here is you name the charity a beneficiary, and when you die, whatever the amount of life insurance is given as a tax credit. You cannot change the beneficiary. So this is great for your planning. It means your children, your spouse, do not have to worry about any money coming out of your estate and being given to the charity, because you have taken a very specific asset, setting it aside and saying, this is the amount that I'm going to give to the charity. And it's terrific for the charity because the charity now knows that they're the beneficiary and you can't change the beneficiary. So that gives them some ability to plan for the future. A lot of people have existing life insurance policies. I probably every other week talk to somebody who says, The reason I took out this life insurance policy no longer exists. My kids have now grown up, or maybe I'm widowed, um, and I don't really need it anymore. So I was thinking about canceling it. And this is then when we take a look at the policy and go over potential advantages to giving an existing policy to a charity. So term insurance, which a lot of you may be familiar with, there's 10-year term, 20-year term, term to 100, but you're buying insurance for a term of time. If you're buying 10-year term insurance or 20-year term insurance, at the end of 10 years or 20 years, the premium goes up. There's no cash values, and these policies are canceled by the insurance companies, usually at age 75 or 80. So if you took out a term policy, let's say when you were 30, you had a mortgage, you had kids, and if something happened to you, you needed that money to go to your family. And now you're older and you no longer have that need, so you're going to cancel the term insurance. Because you are older and you may have had a health change, we can actually have that policy valued, a fair market value for CRA or Canada revenue purposes. And when you donate that term insurance policy to the charity, there is a value that is deemed that you have given them, and that can be a tax deduction for you, even though there's no cash values. What happens is we would take this term policy and convert it to a permanent cash value policy. Some charities have the ability to start paying the premiums for you. Others do not. That's a more complicated thing. But before you cancel a term insurance and you don't need it, if you have a philanthropic urge, please reach out to me, your advisor, MAiDHouse, and we can go through that option with you to see if there's some real value that you can get a tax credit for and that would help the charity you're interested in. If you have an existing whole life or permanent insurance policy or universal life insurance policy that has cash values, you can donate that policy to the charity, and this is done through a transfer of ownership. And when you have a transfer of ownership, there's a deemed disposition, and you will get a tax credit for the deemed value of that policy. And the deemed value of that policy will be the minimum of what the cash value is, but it may in fact be worth a lot more because again, you bought the policy a number of years ago when you were younger. And as we get older, our risk of dying becomes closer. And so that policy is worth more money because the period of time and before it's going to pay out has moved along. So hopefully that one's not too complicated, but you can buy a new policy or you can gift one that is already existing. So if you do buy a new policy, and in this case, you name the charity as the owner and the beneficiary, then you get to write off the annual premiums. So if we go back to that example of $5,000 a year and a $200,000 policy, what you're doing in this case, when you're making the charity the owner and the beneficiary, is that you're choosing to write off the premium. So you don't write off the premium and the death benefit. When the charity is the owner and the beneficiary, you tax deduct that premium every single year. So let's say you're paying $5,000 a year for a $200,000 insurance policy and you pay into it for 10 years. You will get $5,000 tax credit each and every year, and you will have donated $50,000. And we're going to assume today that everybody's in a 50% tax bracket for ease. So that donation will have only cost you $25,000, and at some future point, the charity will get the $200,000 life insurance policy. So those are two of the simplest ways to think about giving or purchasing life insurance and giving it to the charity. As we said, in the year of death, you can actually tax deduct 100% of whatever your income is through a donation credit. So now you can see when you use a life insurance policy, that can actually be a very large number. I mean, we have clients who do donate millions of dollars through a life insurance policy. So again, depending on your particular situation, and we're going to get to this in a minute, it may in fact help you with tax planning, as well as helping out the charity. Always check with your tax advisors. That's my E&O there. So here we're going to have an example of a 60-year-old donor who purchased a life insurance policy with $1 million death benefit, names the charity as the owner and the beneficiary. The donor pays $20,000 a year annually in premiums and receives a tax credit for each payment. On the donor's death, the charity gets $1 million and the donor's estate has no additional tax liabilities. Assuming the donor passes at age 82, they would have given away $240,000 with annual tax credits, costing them $120,000, and the charity receives $1 million. So let's look at something that we're calling the cottage inheritance and life insurance donation. You bought a cottage in 1950. In 1950, $50,000 probably got a pretty great cottage. Today, just with land value, it's worth $2 million. If you sold the cottage today, or if in fact in your will, you left the cottage to your children, that's a deemed disposition of the asset. And all of those capital gains are due on your cottage. So if you leave a cottage in your will to the next generation, it's as if you sold it. If you leave the cottage to your spouse, there's a rollover, so it didn't happen until the second person died. So let's assume you bought the cottage for $50,000. It's now worth $2 million, and you die, and your estate now has a $1,950,000 capital gain. Capital gains in Canada, 50% are taxable. I know they've just gone up to 2/3. A lot of us are hoping it's going to go back down to 50%. But again, just for the ease, we're going to use 50% because that's what it was up until a few months ago. So 50% of the $1,950,000 capital gain is taxable. So that means your estate, in order to pass the cottage on to the next generation, has to pay taxes on $975,000. Wow, like that's a lot of money. So if your estate doesn't have cash on hand to pay $487,000, that cottage is not going to be passed on. So what is the executor going to do? The executor is going to have to sell the cottage, sell other assets, or hopefully you have done some tax planning and you've bought a life insurance policy. We commonly see people buy life insurance policies, often on a joint last to die basis, because capital gains taxes on assets like private shares in a corporation, a cottage, a chalet, rental homes, things like that. They are not payable if you are in a marriage until the second person dies. So often we see a joint last to die insurance policy that pays out when the second person dies. You don't have to set it up that way. And if you're not married or you're widowed, you can have a policy that's just on your life. But there is no way around that $487,500 is going to be due to the government before your executor is allowed to follow your will and pass that cottage ownership on to your children. So we see a lot of cottages going up for sale these days because the value of land has just gone up significantly and there is not enough liquidity in people's estates. So if we move to the next slide, we say, well, in this case, the donor has $1 million life insurance policy that they've been paying into, and they've named the charity as a beneficiary. So on the donor's death, the charity receives $1 million and the donor gets a charitable tax credit of $500,000. So that tax credit now will go directly against the tax that you owe CRA. And voila, that cottage can now be passed on to the next generation, or the shares in the private corporation, whatever it might be. Does somebody have a question, Tekla?
Yeah, it's just a little bit about, I'm not sure it's the cottage, but it is about how you claim the premiums paid into a life insurance policy on income tax. This person's been paying into a life insurance policy for their spouse, but they never thought of claiming the premiums on the income taxes. So was just wondering where on your income tax do we claim this? And do you have any comment on that?
Yeah, so you can only claim the premiums if you have named the charity on the life insurance policy. Life insurance is always paid out tax-free. So when I have life insurance on my husband and I pay that premium, it is not tax deductible because when my husband dies, I receive that money tax-free. But if I'm paying $5,000 a year on a life insurance policy and I have named the charity as the owner and the beneficiary, then I claim that premium, the $5,000, the same way I would as if I gave cash to the charity. It's on the same line in the tax return. But you cannot tax deduct life insurance premiums unless a charity is involved. So hopefully that answers the question. So in this situation, you'll see that the client had a cost of $120,000 because they paid $20,000 a year and they got a tax credit each year for the $20,000, and half of that went against their taxes. So they had a cost of $120,000. $1 million went to the life insurance or went to the charity, and the $500,000 tax credit wiped out the $487,500 that was due to the government in order for that cottage to be passed on. So there's even a little bit of money there to probably pay for some legal fees and accounting fees and things like that to help people to understand that. So this is just one simple concept. When you die, your estate may owe taxes for many, many reasons. So a life insurance policy that is donated to a charity can help your estate with this tax credit and planning in so many different ways. This is why you really want to engage with somebody, because it can be pretty creative and pretty wonderful, but you need to know to work with somebody who knows what they're talking about. So this, again, we're just reviewing that you had paid $240,000 in total premiums over the lifetime of the $1 million policy with the 50% tax deduction on the premium. So here you made the charity the beneficiary because you're deducting the premiums. So your net cost was $120. Okay, so I think we've gone over that a fair amount. All right. The next one, let's talk. I just want to watch my time here because we're 7:35. Let's talk about donating stocks because this is a really big one. If you just give cash to a charity, obviously you get a tax deduction. If you give stocks to a charity, one of the wonderful things that the government has done is that they will waive the capital gains on that stock if it's in a position where it's appreciated. So why would we donate a stock? We're going to avoid the capital gains tax. There's no tax on the appreciation of the donated stocks. We're going to get a tax receipt for the full value, and the charity receives the full value of the stock. So let's take a look at an example here. You have a stock that today is worth $50,000, and you originally purchased those stocks at $10,000. So let's just say you bought TD stock for $10,000. Today it's worth $50,000. If you sold that TD stock, you have a $40,000 capital gain. Again, capital gains are 50%. So you would owe taxes on $20,000, meaning you would have to pay $10,000 in capital gains. So let me just go over that again. You own TD stock today that's worth $50,000. You bought it at $10,000, so it's gone up in value of $40,000. 50% of the $40,000 is taxable. So you owe taxes on $20,000. Again, we're assuming you're in a 50% tax bracket. So on the $20,000, you owe $10,000. That means the charity's going to get $40,000. You will get a tax receipt for that, and you'll get a $20,000 savings in taxes. If we looked at this from another point of view, because that was when you sold the stock and then gave the money to the charity. But if instead you worked with your investment advisor and you chose a stock that had a high capital gain position, a stock that had gone up a lot in value, and you donated the stock, this is the better scenario. So you bought the stock, the TD stock, let's say for $10,000, and today it's worth $50,000. There is no tax on that $40,000 capital gain. So you are automatically saving yourself $10,000 in taxes by donating the stock versus selling the stock first and then giving cash. The charity, therefore, receives something that is worth $50,000. The charity can choose to keep the stock or sell the stock. It really doesn't matter. But you are now going to get a tax receipt for $50,000, which is a savings of $25,000. So in this case, by donating the stock versus selling it first, your charity gets $10,000 more and you save $5,000 more in stock. So hopefully that one is a little bit more clear. We work with a number of clients at Davis Ray each year in trying to identify what would be the appropriate stock to give, because sometimes people have legacy positions in their stock portfolios. They have a stock that they bought years and years ago and they just loved it so much they never sold it. And now they'd actually like to sell it, but the capital gains taxes on it that are owing are so large that they don't want to. And again, in Canada, when you die, excuse me, there's a deemed disposition of all assets. So in that same case scenario, when you die, if you haven't paid the capital gains taxes on that TD stock, it will be as if the day you died, that $50,000 TD stock was sold and your estate will owe the capital gains taxes. So again, if you have a stock that you are not sure you want to sell because of all the taxes owing, it's a really, really wonderful time to look at donating that stock to the charity so they get full value. You miss out on paying the capital gains taxes and you get a larger tax credit. So that was really all I wanted to go into today, Tekla, because I think it is such a complicated area and I really just wanted to talk about cash, wills, life insurance, and stock. To get into more details, I think would just be too complicated on this kind of a webinar. There are no situations where I have come across that you can donate money with a zero cost to you. So there always has to be some reason that somebody wants to give money to have impact or help a cause. But there are ways to minimize what the out-of-pocket cost is to you or what the out-of-pocket cost is to your family so that they still enjoy all of the assets and the wealth that you have created at the same time being able to help out a charity.
Thanks so much, Libby, for taking us through that. There are some questions coming, so I'm just going to kind of
Right.
pose them to you and see where we go with that. Another question is the situation for giving, sorry, it just popped down my screen. Is the situation for giving to a charity different in Quebec if you are using these kind of ways of donating, these estate planning, more legacy?
The only thing that would be different in Quebec is that we have a federal donation tax credit and a provincial donation tax credit. And I'm not familiar with the provincial Quebec tax credit, but each province would be slightly different. Overall, the two tax credits, as soon as you're over $250, a pretty low threshold, should be somewhere around 50%. And it's important to note that it's not a tax deduction, it's a tax credit. So if you owe $50,000 in taxes and you have a $10,000 tax credit, it goes against the taxes you owe. It's not like an RSP where it's deducted from your income. And actually, one of the things I wanted to talk about just briefly is a lot of people don't know that when they die, if they don't have a spouse, the amount of money left in their RSP or their RIF, if you're over age 71, is taxable as income in the year you die. So if you have $200,000 in an RSP and you die, it's as if you made $200,000 this year. And this is a terrific way to be able to use a life insurance policy to offset those taxes so that your children or heirs can receive the full amount of your RSPs while also being able to give money to a charity.
I think another interesting question, I'm just wondering from your perspective, it's not so much the financial tools, but at MAiDHouse, when we're talking to people, and I see that there's some other people on the call who are death doulas and stuff, and we're broaching the conversations about end of life or death. And then people are reluctant to do that. You've been so generous with us before and volunteered at the Brickaden Dialogues. And I know we've had conversations about, wow, people don't want to talk about that. And I
Yep.
wonder how that, resistance to, end of life or, medical assistant dying or the variety of other ways, how that happens or how that interlays with resistance or discomfort in talking about money and that because money also you started by saying that can cause discomfort in the way, and so now you have two topics that some people aren't that comfortable dealing with. I just wonder how you deal with that and how you
Yeah,
have that
I think
conversation.
that's such an awesome topic, Tekla. And I have to say, my stepmother died in June of this year, and we hired two death doulas. And I cannot tell you how wonderful it was to have two people who obviously had a depth of experience and were trained in helping us have very difficult conversations about her end of life healthcare and where she wanted to die, where my dad wanted her to die. And I think that it's actually a really great time because my stepmom died in a hospice, and we want to donate money to the hospice now. And so I think it's a really great time. And I'd be really happy to talk to any death doula to be able to help them with this because it can ease some of the um, pain and discomfort and helplessness around, I can't help this person who is transitioning to the next life, but potentially if some of the treatments or the care or the facilities they've been in have been fantastic, that they can feel that there is some positivity through the passing of their loved one by being able to create some money to help those organizations, the services or the places where people are dying to continue on. It's also a cultural thing, I find, Tekla, that some cultures are really not very comfortable at all talking about money, and others really are. I encourage all of our clients, they don't have to say the amount of money that they are leaving to a charity or leaving to their kids or what they're worth, but to talk in dialogue around what their philosophies are and why they might want to leave money to a charity, or why they might want to leave money to the grandkids instead of the kids, or there's all sorts of number of things. And we've also got 50% divorce. So you've got a whole bunch of complications in, like I had a stepmom. You have complications in second spouses and stepchildren, and they're all very, very sensitive conversations. And maybe if these death doulas are in such a position that they don't want to get into the conversations themselves, that they can bring it up as something that those people should be engaging in a conversation with a trusted advisor, because
Yeah,
we've
so
seen
it
situations
sounds
that have been very jarring for the children where they had no idea that the majority of an estate was going to a charity or one child. Or we've had situations where a spouse actually had no idea the size of a mortgage on a house. So it is a time where money plays a really important role for whoever is left behind, and to have some clarity around that can often ease the anxiety that naturally comes with somebody who's transitioning to the other side.
And it sounds like MAiDHouse, when we are supporting on the day of provision, we're having lots of different conversations. But it also sounds like when you're doing this kind of financial planning, you should be looking for financial advisors who are comfortable having discussions, both financially and those sensitive, but also comfortable with looking at legacy and end of life, that is a particular skill as well that gets combined. In the audience, if you do have any other questions, don't hesitate to put them in the Q&A or in the chat. We have a few more minutes if you wanted to delve a little bit deeper into some of these options around legacy and estate planning.
Yeah, another thing that we have done with clients who are receiving Canada Pension Plan, CPP, which is taxable as income to you. And if you happen to be in a situation where you don't need that extra income, we have worked with clients to say, let's take that Canada Pension income and purchase a life insurance policy. Because now, again, if you made the policy, the charity the beneficiary, you could write off the premiums. If you make the charity the owner and the beneficiary, then at your death, you get the tax credit. So some people have said, I wish I could give back CPP. I don't need it. I mean, it's a very individual feeling, but it is one way of saying, well, where would I even come up with the extra money to buy an insurance policy? So there's lots of things to look at.
And so on that, where you get the extra money, there is a question about how much do financial planners that help with giving assets to charities charge? Is it by the hour or by the type of service provided? What are some of the fee structures that you would be looking at with a
Yeah,
financial
so
advisor?
that's an excellent conversation. And there's really two or three different platforms in Canada. There are a growing number of people who are fee-based planners. So that means they will charge you by the hour or they will charge you by the project. And they do not sell any products. So they will not be managing your money. They will not be doing estate planning and putting life insurance into place to solve whatever problems your death creates. Because if you think about it, life insurance is just the delivery of a tax-free dollar in the future, and we have no idea what that future date is. So fee-based planners only, they vary. If you just need a couple of hours with them, it might be a few $100s. If you have some complicated tax planning where trusts need to be involved, it can be many, many, many thousands of dollars, because also sometimes, for instance, if you're setting up a family trust or you have a child with a disability, you may have to have a tax lawyer involved. So the more complicated it is, obviously, the more money it is. But that's one platform where it is just fee-based only. The other platform that we work at in our firm, because we're a fiduciary investment counsel firm and holistic planning firm, is if you have money invested with us, or if you are doing insurance planning with us, we include all of this planning as part of our value add, because we get paid to either manage your money or we get paid by the insurance policies when you need a particular product. So whether that's Canada Life, Sun Life, we're licensed with all companies in Canada. So there's no cost to you for the advice, and there's no obligation for you to buy insurance. But generally speaking, those are the two platforms in Canada that you're either working with an existing advisor and hopefully they offer financial planning and estate planning and tax planning, or you can look up fee-based planners in Canada, and they have an association where you're just going to pay some sort of a fee for that particular planning.
When you are looking for organizations and the of where to donate or use these alternative methods, obviously MAiDHouse would certainly like to be considered. But what do you think as a nonprofit we should be thinking about to try and demonstrate to potential donors or people who are looking at estate and legacy planning that we would be a good organization. So what should people be looking at, whether it's MAiDHouse or other nonprofits, in terms of like whether they should make these kind of donations, and who are the people within the organizations they should be talking to?
I think it's really important that if you're giving money to a charity, that you feel that charity has sustainability and they're going to be around in the future, particularly if you're doing something with a life insurance policy, which hopefully is a long, long time down the road. So you want to see that a charity is well run. And by that, I don't mean what are their administration fees. There has been so much ruckus around, the cost of having people run a charity. And yet there has been research after research after research done that if you hire highly smart and passionate people to run a charity and you pay them well, that charity will actually flourish and there will be more donor dollars that come in. So I don't think we need to focus on what is the admin fees, but you do want to understand what are the future growth plans of a charity that you're going to give money to. And if you have a particular wish as to how that money is to be used, there's certain rules around that in Canada. So you should talk to that particular charity about, for instance, if you're giving money to MAiDHouse, let's say, is it being used to buy furniture? Is it being used to hire staff? Is it being used for marketing? What is it being used for? But really, you just want to make sure that these charities have longevity, and that obviously there is integrity there too, that they are in alignment with your values and that they have transparency as to how the charity is being run and using the money and that kind of thing. Because that is when I talk to people, their biggest concern to these smaller charities, not breast cancer or one of those that are so huge, but that they will be around. The flip side to that is I'm finding more and more people would like to give to smaller charities because they feel like they're making a bigger difference. Because,
Definitely does. Yeah.
there was a there was a stat in the paper the other day about, the size of these foundations at these universities. And I'm not anti-talking that because I have families that work for university foundations, but they're in the billions and billions and billions of dollars. And I think that this is a really interesting time as humans and Canadians to say, what is going to be the sustainability of our country? What is going to serve us as a community and a nation and people? Where do we need to be investing dollars as the government is pulling back from certain areas of whether that's education or medicine or end of life transitions? So this is where it's so personal, Tekla, that you really want to have somebody that you feel comfortable sharing, your financials, because they need to know everything about you, but also what's in your mind and what's in your heart and what's important to you so that you continue to feel good about your donation even in the future.
Great. So, Libby, it looks like we have gone through the questions from the audience and from us. So I would like to thank you very much again for joining us, for, as you started, the importance of volunteering, for volunteering your time. This is certainly not the first time that you've stepped up for us, both of your expertise, your time, and financial donations. So you definitely walk the talk. So appreciate you coming, sharing the different mechanisms and values and ways of having these conversations. And we wish everyone in the audience, thank you for joining us, and we wish you a good night. There will be a survey on your way out. If you could please answer that, that would be very helpful. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, Tekla.
Thanks,
Bye.
Libby.